Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Andy Harris on the line, and he's president of North American Strategies and managing director over at STS Capital Partners. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. I'm really happy to be here with you today. Thank you.
All right, so we got a lot to talk about today, so I want to definitely get into your book as well, so The Extraordinary Exit. But before we get into that, let's maybe start with an overview of STS Capital Partners. So maybe start by telling us a little bit about the firm, please.
STS Capital Partners is a international sell-side advisory firm, so we help privately held business owners, entrepreneurs, family-held businesses get prepared for an exit, and then we lead the exit for them to achieve an extraordinary exit. And we define that as helping them achieve what their required outcomes are, what must they have with a transaction, and then their preferred outcomes, what other things would they like to have? So the must-haves and the like-to-haves with a great buyer, a great home for the business, and then get paid maximum valuation. And that valuation is a strategic valuation, the integrated strategic value that their business brings with the buyer's business versus just a typical financial valuation in industry or market multiple, the strategic value above and beyond that. So we only do sell side, and we do it internationally. I've got 30 offices around the world, and we're exceptional at STS selling to strategics.
That's amazing. How did you get into this business? Like, where'd that start for you?
Yeah, so our founder, Rob Follows, started this business 23 years ago. He sold his business to a strategic, and at that time he sold it. He couldn't find an advisor to represent his firm that was really not even really started yet at that time. So he sold it on his own, but he sold it for 27 times EBITDA. It was a marketing agency in Canada, and that was knocking the cover off the ball. He then went to work for the strategic that bought him for 5 years as one of their international execs, and helped them do more M&A. And in that role, he learned that they would have paid more than twice as much. They had it modeled out. They would have paid more than twice as much what they paid. Wow. So he left a lot of dollars on the table. Yeah, he went from elated to being sick. And then he started this, that flagged his idea. I got to help people sell to a strategics. And the reason they valued his business so highly was they had all the marketing for General Motors in the United States. He was doing the marketing for General Motors in Canada. NAFTA had just rolled out. They were under competitive pressure to lose their account. And by buying him, they got to roll up all the business in North America with General Motors. And so really the value they placed on his business was kind of the insurance policy of not losing their contract, right? And the value of getting all of the business.
Yeah.
So that flagged his idea. I got to go help people sell to strategics, and he formed that business. Now, I had a background, and we can get into that a little bit later on, but I met Rob 7 years ago, and he, through some mutual connections and through an organization we're involved in, Young Presidents Organization, YPO, I was having lunch with him, and he said, Andy, what are you going to do in the second half of your life? I'm in the second half of my life. And I said, well, I was a hired gun, a professional CEO that worked for 3 different businesses backed by three different private equity firms. I did buy and build roll-ups internationally, built businesses through acquisition largely, integrated them, and then sold them. And I did that several times very successfully. And I thought, well, that's what I'm just going to keep doing that. There are 3 to 4 to 5 year kind of projects. You buy a business and then add to it and build it, and then you sell it. The private equity model. I figured I'll just keep doing that. I'll do that a few more times in the rest of my life. And he said, I have something more purposeful for you. What if you were to help 3 or 4 or 5 families, entrepreneurs, private business owners a year sell their business to a strategic, because you know how to do it, for a lot more than they ever would have sold it on their own, or working with a traditional advisor who only goes out and does market deals. What if you were to go out and help them get strategic deals and sell their business for 30 or 50 or 100% more than they thought or they would have expected? And you can do that 3 to 5 times a year. And it's kind of a really great way of giving back with all the knowledge and wisdom and everything you've learned to help somebody that knows how to run a business and build their business, but maybe don't know how to sell their business. And I said, wow, that seems really purposeful. That'll get me out of bed every morning.
Oh, yeah.
Really to help somebody achieve something extraordinary that they would not have otherwise achieved. And so that's how I got involved with STS, and been doing it now for 6 years, and just love it, really love it.
Man, I want to go further down this line, and I got some more questions for you. But before we do, define strategics. I don't want to assume that everybody listening understands how you're using that term.
Yes. So a strategic buyer would be a buyer that when combined with your business, there's a strategic rationale and there's integrated strategic value that's created. And it's beyond just typical synergies like, oh, we don't need 2 CFOs, so we'll let 1 CFO go. We don't need 2. It's not headcount reduction. That's not strategic value. Those are financial synergies. But strategic value is created when one business, and ideally when both businesses, are better because of the combination. So maybe one brings a set of customers to the other that they desperately would love to have, and maybe one has technology that the other one desperately needs. And so now they're both better and they can both grow faster. So usually the best strategic deals, the synergies are growth synergies and transformation synergies. And that would be a strategic buyer. Now, strategic buyers can also be backed by a private equity firm. Right? So there's a private equity firm. They buy a business. It's called a platform. That's the initial one. And that's what I used to do. They want to do an industry roll-up. So one of them, we bought a business, and then I did 14 others. I bought 14 others and bolted them on, added them on, integrated them over the next 4 years. And we built scale, and we created some really big synergies because of purchasing. We picked up a lot of volume. By the time we were finished, we were buying about 10% cheaper than any of the businesses we bought because we had so much scale. So we really picked up purchasing synergy.
Yeah.
But we were a strategic buyer, but we were backed by private equity. So that then becomes a hybrid. And versus a pure private equity play or financial play is we're just going to buy a business, try to buy it low, and then we're going to improve it a little bit and then sell it high. And that's the typical private equity financial buyer model, which it's interesting. When we were buying businesses in the industry I was in, typical multiples for the size of businesses we were buying, let's say 5 to 7 times EBITDA. And EBITDA is your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's the most common kind of profitability measure that businesses are valued on. So we would buy a business at 5 to 7 times that. We, in our model, knew that we would sell by the time we built some scale at maybe 9 or 10 times. So we would get arbitrage on the multiple. We could create value that way, just simply by buying lower and selling higher. And then, as I mentioned, we'd pick up other synergies, purchasing synergies, maybe some customer synergies, some channel synergies, whatever. But we would grow the businesses also on top of that. And we knew that we would sell at 9 to 10 times. We ended up selling over 12 times in all the businesses.
Wow.
So we really did well. But when I was making these acquisitions, everybody's business that we acquired, they were not using a sell-side advisor. They were just working directly with me and my team. And so when we said, we'll give you 5 to 7 times, we're going to give you a fair deal, we're going to be a great home for your business, we're going to take good care of your employees, they said, yeah, that sounds good. And that is the industry multiple. So they thought they were getting a good deal because that was the industry financial multiple.
Right.
Had they had me working for them as an advisor or our firm working for them, we would have modeled it out and said, wait a second, the industry multiple is 5 to 7, but once you're combined with them, it's worth 50% more than that. It's probably worth 8 or 9 times, right? And had we would have been able to pay that, right? But we just never really got asked to pay that, or if we did, it was never for a good reason. So the way we do it, the point is that those people that we bought their business, we weren't taking advantage of them. We were buying them at the industry financial multiple.
For sure.
But had we been pushed, we would have given them maybe an 8 or 9 because we knew we were still going to make money on that, right? So, and that would have been a significant change in value for them, 30 to 50% more. So that's what we do, and that's the difference between. It's an example of a difference between a pure financial buyer and a strategic buyer, and then getting the strategic value for your business versus just the typical industry market multiple.
Yeah, and so it sounds like it's just common sense that if you can find that strategic angle, like it's going to lead to a higher multiple you're going to be able to sell for, and it's going to be a bigger win, like just period. Like based on what you're outlining. I'm curious what some of the factors are that people should weigh when thinking about something like that. Like what are some of the factors that come into play, just high level?
Sure. Well, first of all, one of the things I want to get back to is there's a lot of investment banks that have specialized teams, or they specialize in a certain sector or a certain market. Mm-hmm. And they're the iBank that's in the industry, and they do a bunch of the deals in the industry. And so they know the buyers really well because they're selling to the buyers, they're selling to the private equity firms, they're selling to the strategics. And that actually creates a bit of a conflict because many times they're doing work for the buyers or for the private equity firms to help them find these businesses. And then when they're representing the business, they're kind of serving two masters. They're serving the owner whose business they're representing, but they're also trying to help the strategic that they do a lot of work with, that they know really well, get the deal.
Yeah.
And
so they're eating on both sides, kind of. They're eating on both sides, right, in the way it's set up.
Exactly. And many times when it's private equity might say, wow, we really like Adam's business. Andy, if you'll help us get it, and what we're going to pay an industry multiple for it, then when we go to sell that business in 3 to 5 years, we'll let you sell it. So the investment banker in that case, and a lot of investment bankers that are specialists in an industry, this is kind of the way they work. They're getting it, they're selling it to the private equity firm today, and then 3 to 5 years from now, they get to sell it again to the next buyer. And it's kind of the way it works, and there's a little bit of a conflict there. And so I think that's a big consideration. Another consideration is when we run a process and we go out to look for strategic buyers can be the usual suspects, the people that are in the space that are your top competitor, or maybe you're on the West Coast and there's one on the East Coast, and that would be a great combination. That's kind of like a typical strategic buyer. But the best strategic buyers many times can be someone that's not in a space, that's in an adjacency. Would love to have access. Would love to have access to they have a service or something that could serve all of your customers, and it helps them expand who they are. And then jointly, maybe what you have, they can bring to their customers because they're in a different segment doing something different. And so those can be the best strategic buyers that bring outlier value because there's so much transformative strategic value that's created. So, and that's another reason why working with an industry specialist investment banking firm or sell-side advisor firm, they're just only looking at their specialty, their space that they're specialized in. And they don't think about the other segments and the other adjacencies, and they're not as creative because they're only kind of just being the specialist in their space. And so owners can lose outlier deals that a specialist wouldn't normally think of or bring to the table.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, actually. And you could see it because it's not necessarily what they would be, I don't want to use the word paid for, but it's just they're specialized in one thing, so they're not going to see an adjacent. Like they're just not. It's like it's hard to see the old saying, hard to see the picture when you're when you're standing in the frame, that old saying. It's just hard.
Yeah, and they wanted to get deals done in the space, right?
Yeah.
So they're really transactional. Yeah, they'll get a deal done. They'll get it done at the industry multiple, but the buyer ends up potentially leaving a lot of value on the table that they would have they don't capture.
Makes a lot of sense. I want to switch it up a bit here for a moment, Andy, for some of the time we have left here. So let's get into your book a bit. So The Extraordinary Exit: How to Sell Your Business for Maximum Value, Protect Your Legacy, and Walk Away with No Regrets. So talk to me. What sparked this?
Yeah, so I co-authored it with Jonathan Sherrill. He had a business called Quicken Steel, which I represented him and sold his business for him. Quicken Steel was a manufacturer of pre-engineered steel buildings, sheds, barns, airline hangars, mini storage, and even small 2 or 3 bedroom homes. You go onto his website, you design it, it's pre-engineered metal, it shows up on a flatbed, you have your foundation laid, and you can erect it. And it's a really cool business. So we sold his business. And for a truly extraordinary exit. He had an idea in mind of what his business was worth. His dad had sold a metal roofing business a few years earlier. They knew what that was valued at. And so he had an idea what his business was worth. He talked to other people in the industry. We did our analysis. We did our comps. And we said, here's what we think market value would be, industry multiple value would be. He said, that's it. We're aligned. If you can get me that number, good. But I'm hiring you to hopefully get me something north of that, selling to a strategic. And so we were aligned on value. He had another required outcome that he had to have, and that was that he had to exit the business. He had to leave the business. He had a daughter has a daughter who has special needs, and she was at an age now in her life where he's like, boy, these years are really, really precious. I need to spend time with, help her in this next stage of life for her at where she was. And so we had to find a buyer that was happy to buy the business, but didn't need Jonathan. They would let him leave. And so at the end of the day, that's what we found. We found a buyer that didn't need Jonathan. They had a team in place. It was a great home for the business, a great strategic fit. And that was also very important to Jonathan, that they wouldn't touch the business. They would actually give it more opportunities to grow, not touch the employees. And they end up paying 100% more than what Jonathan thought his value would be, and what we set the financial value would be. And that was because of the strategic value that was created. And we actually had a couple buyers in the end that were competing for the business. And the offers were ultimately came as they moved up. They landed pretty much so right on top of one another. And so Jonathan was fortunate that he was able to decide which the buyers he'd like to work with, that he think were the best and the best home for the business. But it was truly an extraordinary exit for him. So about a year after that happened, Jonathan called me up and said, Andy, I want to write a book and tell my story. And it wasn't on like my big list of things to do. It'd be nice to do maybe at some point in time in the future. And my forum in YPO has always been telling me, Andy, you've got to write a book about what you do and everything you've learned. And so they were egging me on to do that. I just never had done it. Jonathan called, says, let's write a book. I said, wow, I would love to do that with you, Jonathan. So Jonathan tells his story from his perspective as business owner. I tell my story from my perspective as the sell-side advisor. And then I also weave in a lot of other stories of other clients that we've worked with. And so it's a book that says a lot of what to do and what not to do, lessons learned, and really all the best practices in a story format of selling your business for an extraordinary exit. And I've had several people that have read the book, and Jonathan and I both have, that have now, they've come to us and said, boy, I wish I read that book before I sold my business.
Yes.
There's so many mistakes I made that you guys highlight in your story. So Jonathan avoided a lot of mistakes, and so that's part of the story is we did a lot of right things to avoid a lot of mistakes. And then I do highlight other mistakes from other businesses and things like that. So, but it's all told in a story format, and it was just because Jonathan wanted to tell his story, and I'm grateful he reached out to me, and it's been a great experience to write that with Jonathan. And I think we share some golden nuggets and a lot of wisdom that will create a lot of value for people.
Man, I love it. Andy, this has been great having you on the show today and getting to know a little bit more about what you're doing over at STS Capital Partners and also about the book. So how to sell your business for maximum value. So the extraordinary exit. That being said, if somebody's listening or watching this and if they want to learn more about STS Capital Partners or to connect with your book, The Extraordinary Exit, how do they do that?
They can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Also email me, aharris@stscapital.com. And our website is stscapital.com.
Fantastic. Perfect. For everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so that you can just click on the links and head right on over and connect with Andy and his team. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. You heard me correct. Each and every day, bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So hit that subscribe or follow button. And Andy, again, appreciate you coming on.
Adam, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. I wish you well.